Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. We're in the greenhouse today. It's a typical January morning. I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about today until I saw this guy over here coming into full bloom, so I thought we'd talk about some cacti. Now, um, you may see what's sitting beside me here and go, I don't see any cacti there, but uh, these are all cacti, and most of what we're looking at right now is plants in the Rhipsalis family or mistletoe cactus. Um, it's an interesting group, and there is a whole range of cacti that sort of fall into this group of epiphytic um, cacti, meaning they don't grow in the ground. They grow like orchids and bromeliads in the nooks and crannies of trees, um, up off the ground, uh, in the jungle canopy, basically. And they are jungle plants, even though they are cacti. They are cacti that have uh, evolved and live quite happily in rainforests and other jungle areas. Now, cacti in general are a new world group of plants, meaning they come from the Americas, from North America all the way down well into South America and all the way through. Um, Rhipsalis is the one exception where there are Rhipsalis species, just one Rhipsalis species that actually grows in sort of what's considered the old world, and that's Rhipsalis baccifera, the mistletoe cactus, and that's this guy over here. We'll look at him a little bit closer in a minute. It actually lives in Madagascar and the islands in the South Indian Ocean. So it's kind of an interesting little disjointed part of the cactus family. So the Rhipsalis, one of the epiphytic cactus that we see a lot, and we will have just sort of seen a lot of, is the Christmas cactus. It sort of falls into this group, um, and the Easter cactus as well. Those are other species of epiphytic cacti, but we're going to sort of concentrate a little bit on the Rhipsalis and a couple of other genera today. They're called mistletoe cactus because if you look at this guy here, you'll see the fruit on this one. I'll bring it a little closer. This is Rhipsalis coelumbifera, and if you look at the fruit,
Mr. Mason, this is pointed the wrong way. There, now you can see Jeff.
oh, can you see it? Okay. The fruit is
No.
looks like mistletoe, white little translucent berries. Quelimbensis is nice because all the new growth is bright red too, which is quite attractive. It's just coming into new growth. And Baccifera, this guy here, I don't know if he's got any fruit on him at the moment, but he does the same thing. Tiny little white flowers on Rhipsalis, and they will get completely covered with these translucent white berries. Now, the one that caught my eye as I was looking around the greenhouse was this guy at the far end here. You may have to turn that camera. It's this guy here with the bright yellow flower clusters just coming into bloom, not quite open yet. This is Hatiora. Might actually even be back in Rhipsalis again. I'm not sure. A lot of name changes come and go with these varieties. This is an old one. It's been around for years as a houseplant. It's sometimes called drunkard's dream because if you look at the little growth bits, they look like little upside down bottles, right? So that's called drunkard's dream. It is another one of the epiphytic cacti. Super easy to grow, and blooming sort of eh, usually winter, early spring, late spring, through that time period. Um, and then we hang them outside for the summer. We hang them up in the trees. They like semi-shade, a little bit of sun. You have to remember that these are not cacti that are growing out in the desert. These are cacti that are growing in the jungles under the trees. So they get a little bit more moisture than regular cacti. You can see the thinner stems can dry out a little bit quicker, um, but they will take periods of drought, which is kind of fun. And they make really interesting hanging baskets and companion plants in your houseplant collections for orchids, bromeliads, um, you know, ferns. This is what they all grow with in a community. So they're very, very easy to grow. And there's a lot of different varieties. So you get a lot of different interesting leaf habits and foliage habits and that sort of thing. One thing to remember, of course, like all cacti, uh, you're looking always at stems. These are not leaves. These are all just stems. Leaves have disappeared. So these are all stems. The stems have the chlorophyll. They do the work of the plant growing. Uh, so when they bloom, they're blooming off the ends or along the stems. And you can see with this one, would have had little white flowers along these long stem sections, and then the fruit afterwards. Now, there are some related plants that we don't often see uh, in collections and in garden centers, partly because the plants might be a little bit ugly, uh, and they do take up a lot of space, and that's the epiphyllums. I've got one over my head here. This is Epiphyllum oxypetalum. There is a dwarf one. This is Epiphyllum pumilum, the miniature queen of the night. Now, these are not exciting plants to look at, but neither are most orchids when they're not blooming. So they're allowed to be not great at a certain time of the year. But they give you some of the most spectacular flowers you will ever see in any plant family. The epiphyllums, especially this guy up here above my head, this is Epiphyllum oxypetalum. And interestingly enough, as I was just talking about stems, you're just looking at stems, remember. It has two sort of types of stems. It has these long, straight, what are more typical looking stems, and then it has these wider, flatter, more leafy looking stems. Now, it is all stems. The leafy looking stems is where the flowers come from. And the neat thing about these guys is that when they bloom, they get massive flowers, 6 to 8 inches across, pure white flowers with pink backs, extremely fragrant. The flowers, as magnificent as they are, bloom at night. Remember, cacti are usually in dry areas, so nighttime is a better time for the flowers to open. They're pollinated by bats. The flowers open at night, and they last one night. So it's kind of a huge explosion of excitement when it blooms. And this one actually bloomed. It is grown from a cutting, so it's big enough to bloom. And it did give us a flower or two this past summer. Once they get bigger, they can produce 20, 30 flowers over the course of the growing season. So it's pretty spectacular, even though the plant's a little ugly and a little bit ungainly. It is kind of a vine. They want to climb up and scramble up through the branches of trees. And that's sort of how they get this habit. This long, slender stem here would have gone up, and then these guys will get up into the canopy of the trees and wrap themselves around uh, small branches and things and support themselves that way. Uh, a lot of fun when they bloom uh, because the flowers start opening at about 6 o'clock in the evening. By midnight, they're fully open, and by 6 or 7 the next morning, they are finished and shutting down. So it's a pretty spectacular one night show. You can actually sit and actually watch the flowers open. So it is a lot of fun in that respect.
Now, if you were growing that in your house, Jeff, and you wanted to keep it a little more, tame looking, could you grow it up a pole?
Well, you could grow it up a pole, and actually, this one is in a basket now, but as it's getting bigger, will probably get transferred to a pot and be staked. You could put like, you know, a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 foot bamboo pole in there and support these stems with on a bamboo pole, and then the plant will be much tidier in its habit and easier to keep as a house plant. Drag them outside for the summer, put them in a shady spot in the summer. They love that, and they'll grow like crazy. The smaller ones tend to work well in baskets, as you can see the Pumilium sort of suits a basket quite well. This is a 6-inch basket and a fully mature plant in there, so it's a little bit easier to manage maybe. Now, the epiphyllums take into account a lot of different plants. And as you're looking around in the houseplant section of your garden centers, you might see some other odd plants. Um, One of them is this guy, and you might see him labeled as a Selenocereus, but it has actually been moved back to epiphyllum. Um, this is Epiphyllum chrysocardium, and it has a real sort of they kind of call these rickracks or fish bones or things because they kind of have that sort of fish spine with ribs kind of look to them. And then again, they make big, sprawling, hanging baskets because again, they are hanging out of trees in the wild. So you need to keep an eye on that. And they're cool looking plants. And then again, they get the great big white fragrant flowers at night as well. So they're pretty attractive that way, even though they're kind of an oddball looking plant. And again, they all like the same kind of conditions. You never want to put these in full blazing sun because they will cook. They don't like that. They need to be in a dappled shade. So they make a great house plant in that respect. Um, Evenly moist. Let them slightly dry between waterings. Feed them regularly through the growing season and less through the winter. Easy, easy. Now, another group of cacti that are interesting and similar to these guys, but they have an interesting trait. Now I'm going to I'll pull this one out first. This is another cacti that's a little bit different. This is a Pereschia. Now, Pereschia are climbing, scrambling shrubs, Central America, Northern South America. Uh, Interesting in that they are a true cacti. They're a true cactus. They have spines, but they're very primitive in the fact that they actually grow leaves and have actual true leaves. Where most cacti, the leaves have just turned into spines. Pereschia has spines, and I can show you maybe it's a little bit. I can move up. You can see on the stem here, there are clusters of spines.
Put your hand behind it.
They have clusters of spines. Where the spines meet is the glaucoid, which all cactus have. So with that feature, it's a true cactus. These would have been leaves that have modified over time to become spines, but the Pereschias have never lost their actual true leaves. Now, these have been sitting dormant, so they're just coming into growth. So they'll be much more covered in leaves, sort of overshadowing the spines. Now, the neat thing about Pereschia, especially this one, this is Pereschia aculeata, it produces masses of little white flowers and afterwards produces completely edible fruit that are often called Barbados gooseberries. They're a very tasty little fruit, a bit like a ground cherry in sort of the size. Flavor's a bit different, but they do produce an edible fruit and can be grown for their fruit. So if you're looking for something, if you're into edibles, if you're looking for something a little bit different for the vegetable garden, a Pereschia culeata would be kind of a neat addition to grow a tropical fruit that you can eat right off the vine. The plants I got this from, we got it in Florida a number of years ago, so brought some seed home, and I ate some of the fruit right off the plant, and it was quite tasty. Now, it's a neat plant, but it has a selection that I'm just going to pull out here for a second. This is Pereschia aculeata godseffiana. It's much more ornamental than Pereschia aculeata. Again, just coming into growth, so ignore the fact that they're kind of sparse. But this one has gorgeous sort of orange foliage with beautiful red new growth, and the back of the petal leaves are a gorgeous sort of reddish purple as well. So it's a beautiful house plant. We were at Longwood Gardens a couple of years ago, saw some beautiful plantings of this. It is kind of a vine, so you do need to give it some support. But at Longwood, they had this growing up through other tropicals, and just the hint of these gorgeous foliage coming out through was really a beautiful um, thing. Super, super easy to grow, the Pereskias. In fact, they're virtually indestructible. Pereschia culeata is actually, it's a Caribbean fruit, but in South Africa and places like that, it's become naturalized, and it's actually a real weed in some of the places like South Africa. I came across a picture of a tree they were trying to get rid of. They had come across it, they had cut it off and left it dry for 4 years. And as soon as it got some moisture hitting it, it started to grow again. So, we don't have to worry about that because they certainly would never survive our winter. But neat tropical fruit, a neat ornamental plant, and then one more to look at. And again, we're just coming into their growth season, so they're a bit sparse. This used to be considered a Pereschia, but now it's been moved out into another related genus. Uh, if you look around, you'll see it called Pereschia grandiflora. Uh, and it is actually, when it comes into full growth and it starts to bloom, it's a gorgeous plant. Wickedly spiny. The spines are very big. You can see the spines here. So you have to really watch because it's very leafy, big spines. But when it comes into full bloom, and it blooms quite easily, you can see it just starting to come into bloom here. You get big clusters of sort of single rose-like pink flowers that'll bloom all summer long. So it's a really interesting uh, tropical for cactus growers, epiphyte growers, if you're looking for something to sort of broaden your collection of tropical plants, and really easy going. Because they're cactus, if they get missed watering or something, it doesn't matter. They don't care. The Pereskias in that will kind of drop a few leaves if they get too dry, but they bounce right back with a good watering. And again, even though they are cacti, remember, these are all jungle plants and would like to have sort of that jungly atmosphere uh, with a bit more moisture perhaps than regular cacti and not full. We got any questions today, Laura, coming up?
We have a question not about the cactus. We have a question about amaryllis.
Amaryllis, absolutely.
Recently talked about planting amaryllis bulbs.
Yeah.
What do you do with the bulb when it's finished?
Well, I'm just going to step off camera here for 1 second because I was hoping we could get to look at this guy today. This is one of the Cybistar amaryllis. This is Mystica, I believe. Yeah. So right now, whoops, little slug there. Right now he's in a 6-inch pot. Most amaryllis grow like this. They throw up a flower spike um, and bloom for us. After the bloom is there for a while, what will start happening is the leaves will start growing. And this one hasn't quite started yet, but you can see the leaves are right here starting to grow. You have a few options. If you just enjoy it for the flowers, you can just throw it out, get rid of it, put it in the compost when you're done. But if you keep them growing, uh, they can be very rewarding. Uh, Amaryllis are a bulb. They are just coming into their growing season when they bloom. So they bloom first, and then that usually signals the start of the rainy season. So why the plant blooms right at the beginning of the rainy season is that it's going to set seed after it blooms. The seed is going to drop and it's going to germinate during that rainy season. So that's why it blooms and then the rainy season comes. Also in the rainy season is when the plant starts to grow. So what you're going to do after your bulbs are finished, you probably don't want them to set seed. You're not likely going to want to invest the years of growing to get a seedling to flower. So you take the flower stalk off, just cut it off, allow the foliage to grow. So you're going to keep the foliage growing as a house plant. You're going to keep it watered. You're going to fertilize it. What your goal is, as is with any other plant or any other bulb plant, is you want to increase the size of the bulb. So by growing it through the season, so you're going to grow this from now until May, then you're going to put it outside. Put it outside, mix it in with your containered plants so it can get watered and fertilized all season long. And then in the fall, sometime around September, early October, you're going to stop watering it. You're going to force it into a dormant period of about 3 to 4 months, after which, if it grew well and was happy, it will start to send up a flower stalk. And then you can pot it on and have it for the winter in bloom like you just potted. It's really easy to do. Most hybrids, because they're bred to bloom a lot, will push out flowers like crazy. I mean, we've had some where, we've had them bloom twice a season, uh, and just do it repeatedly year after year. So keep the plant growing, keep the foliage growing as long as you can. Like I say, we'll throw them out in our containers, or if you got a vegetable garden, knock them out of the pots, pop them in a row in the vegetable garden, and let them grow there for the summer. And then dig them, give them a rest in September. Yeah, any other questions?
Nope. Diane was just saying you're growing a lot of the things that she has growing in her South Florida garden. So it's neat to see that.
You know what? If I was in South Florida, these would all be out in the garden, absolutely. And I want you to have a look at at the Ripsalis cactus and the mistletoe cactus. When you're at the garden centers, there are a few varieties that are quite available. Super easygoing house plants. Certainly, definitely a different look from other house plants you'll have, and kind of a fun group to grow and collect.
That's it.
All right, if we got no more questions, we'll leave you for today. And remember that all of these Facebook Lives we put up onto our YouTube channel, so you can get them anytime. Just go to YouTube, look for Mason House Gardens Let's Get Growing page, subscribe. We like to get subscribers. It makes us look good on YouTube's eyes. So subscribe there, and we'll see you next time on Let's Get Growing.